The bakery went completely silent the moment the woman whispered that she couldn't afford the birthday cake anymore. The little boy standing beside her never complained, never cried, never begged. He simply looked through the glass at the colorful cake with tiny blue balloons made of frosting, smiled for one heartbreaking second, and quietly stepped back as if he had already learned that dreams were not meant for children like him. Across the room, a tired single father carrying his own daughter's birthday cupcakes witnessed everything. He had come in expecting an ordinary afternoon, but what happened next would change 3 lives forever and remind everyone watching that sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the greatest miracle. Before we begin, if you believe that kindness can change lives and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to the Hardworking Dad channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that restore hope and remind the world that humanity still exists. The bright afternoon sun poured through the bakery windows, painting warm golden lines across the polished floor. Families laughed over coffee, children pointed excitedly at rows of colorful pastries, and birthday balloons floated gently near the entrance. It was the kind of peaceful day that made people believe everything in life was exactly as it should be. Yet behind one quiet corner stood a woman whose entire world seemed ready to collapse. Her name was Marissa Holden, a hardworking hotel housekeeper who had spent years trying to give her 8-year-old son, Owen, a childhood filled with love despite having almost nothing else to offer. Every dollar she earned disappeared into rent, groceries, school supplies, electricity, and overdue medical bills from an illness that had nearly taken her job months earlier. She had carefully saved enough money to buy Owen a small birthday cake, promising him that this year would be different. She imagined lighting candles in their tiny apartment, singing together, and pretending, if only for one evening, that life was easy. But that morning everything had gone wrong. The old transmission in her car failed on the way to work. Without transportation she had to pay for emergency repairs because missing work would cost even more than fixing the vehicle. The repair bill swallowed every dollar she had carefully saved for Owen's birthday. Still hoping for a miracle, she walked into the bakery believing perhaps she could find a smaller cake or ask for a payment delay. Instead she discovered that even the simplest cake was now beyond her reach. Standing nearby was Nolan Pierce, a 36-year-old electrician raising his 10-year-old daughter, Hazel, alone after losing his wife to cancer 4 years earlier. Every day since then had been a balancing act between long construction shifts, school pickups, laundry, homework, cooking dinner, and trying to fill both the role of father and mother. He understood exhaustion better than most people. He knew what it meant to smile in front of your child while silently wondering how you would manage tomorrow. Nolan had entered the bakery to collect cupcakes for Hazel's school celebration. She was waiting outside with a backpack almost bigger than she was, humming happily while watching people pass by. Nolan's own life wasn't easy, but over time he had learned something important from his late wife. She often said that kindness costs less than regret, and that whenever life gave you the chance to help someone, you should never ignore it because you never truly know how much they are carrying. As Nolan waited for his order, he noticed Marissa speaking softly with the cashier. He couldn't hear every word, but he saw enough. He watched her remove a few folded bills from her purse, count them again and again, and finally shake her head. The cashier looked genuinely sympathetic, apologizing because store policy would not allow the custom birthday cake to leave unpaid. Marissa nodded politely, thanked the employee for understanding, and gently placed her hand on Owen's shoulder before turning away. Owen looked back one last time at the cake decorated with tiny soccer balls, exactly the design he had chosen days earlier. There were no tears in his eyes. That somehow made the moment even more painful. Children should not learn disappointment so quietly. Nolan stood frozen. He remembered Hazel's 7th birthday, only months after her mother's funeral. Money had been painfully tight then as well. A stranger had anonymously paid for their dinner at a local diner after noticing Hazel trying to smile despite missing her mom. That simple gesture had carried them through one of the darkest nights of their lives. Nolan had promised himself that if he were ever given the opportunity to become that stranger for someone else, he would never hesitate. Without announcing what he was doing, Nolan walked toward the counter and quietly asked the cashier to add Marissa's cake to his bill along with a few extra birthday treats. He requested only one thing. He wanted no attention and no applause. He simply asked the cashier to tell the woman that someone believed her son deserved to celebrate his birthday. When the cashier called Marissa back and explained that the cake had already been paid for, confusion spread across her face. She looked around the bakery, expecting someone to laugh or admit there had been a mistake. Instead, she saw Nolan standing near the door holding Hazel's cupcake box, preparing to leave. The cashier gently pointed toward him. Marissa's hands began to tremble. Months of stress, endless overtime, sleepless nights, and constant worry had built invisible walls around her heart. That single act of kindness shattered them all at once. Tears rolled down her cheeks before she could stop them. Owen hugged the cake box tightly against his chest as though someone had handed him treasure instead of dessert. Nolan simply smiled, wished Owen a happy birthday, and walked out into the warm afternoon before the moment could become uncomfortable. He expected that would be the end of the story. It wasn't. That evening Owen celebrated his birthday inside their modest apartment with paper decorations made from old magazines, candles glowing softly on the little cake, and laughter echoing through rooms that had felt empty for far too long. Marissa secretly cried while watching her son make his birthday wish. She realized he wasn't wishing for expensive toys or vacations. He wished that his mother would always smile. The following week Marissa returned to the bakery carrying a handwritten thank you letter. She hoped the cashier might know how to contact the kind stranger. She wanted nothing more than to express her gratitude properly. The cashier explained that Nolan visited every Friday after work and often picked up treats for his daughter. Friday arrived. Marissa waited nervously outside. When Nolan appeared, she thanked him with tears in her eyes and offered to repay every dollar once she could. Nolan refused. He explained that kindness wasn't a loan. It was something meant to keep moving from one person to another. If she ever found someone else in need someday, that would be more than enough. Those words stayed with Marissa. Over the next several months life slowly began improving. She earned a promotion at the hotel after taking extra hospitality training during evening classes. The raise wasn't enormous, but it finally allowed her to breathe without constant fear of every unexpected expense. Owen continued excelling in school, inspired by his mother's determination and by the memory of the stranger who had shown him that good people still existed. Meanwhile Nolan continued navigating single fatherhood with quiet strength. Hazel noticed that her father often helped neighbors fix broken lights without charging them and frequently left groceries on elderly residents' porches anonymously. Watching him taught her that generosity wasn't something people talked about. It was something they practiced. Nearly a year later another birthday season arrived. Marissa walked into the same bakery and noticed a father standing near the register looking embarrassed. His credit card had been declined, and he quietly asked the cashier to cancel his daughter's birthday order. The little girl beside him stared silently at the pink unicorn cake waiting behind the glass. For a brief moment Marissa saw herself standing in exactly that place 1 year earlier. Without hesitation she stepped forward and paid for the cake before the father could protest. As the little girl hugged the cake box with joyful excitement, Marissa smiled through happy tears. The kindness had continued exactly as Nolan hoped. Several days later she wrote Nolan another letter, telling him what had happened. She explained that his generosity had never truly been about a birthday cake. It had restored something inside her that years of hardship had nearly destroyed. It reminded her that dignity survives when compassion exists. It taught Owen that strangers can become heroes without wearing uniforms or capes. Most importantly, it inspired her to become the kind of person who notices quiet struggles instead of walking past them. When Nolan finished reading the letter, he looked at Hazel, who was now old enough to understand why her father sometimes helped people they didn't know. She smiled proudly. In that moment he realized his late wife's greatest lesson had survived through him and now through his daughter. Love had continued traveling from one family to another, touching people who might never even meet each other. Years passed, but Owen never forgot his 8th birthday. As an adult he volunteered at community food drives, mentored younger children, and organized birthday celebrations for kids whose families couldn't afford them. Every cake he handed to a smiling child carried the invisible memory of one afternoon in a neighborhood bakery where a stranger chose compassion over convenience. The remarkable truth was that nobody involved considered themselves extraordinary. Marissa believed she was simply a mother doing her best. Nolan believed he was only honoring a promise he had once made to his late wife. Hazel believed helping others was simply how good families lived. Yet together they proved that ordinary people create the most extraordinary miracles. Sometimes the world tells us that changing lives requires wealth, influence, or power. But real change often begins with noticing what everyone else ignores. It begins with paying attention to the quiet child who hides disappointment behind a brave smile. It begins with recognizing the exhausted parent carrying invisible burdens. It begins with one decision to care. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with your family and friends, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad so together we can spread more stories that remind people kindness still has the power to transform lives. Special request, comment below with the words, "Kindness lives on," if you believe that one small act of compassion can create a ripple that changes countless lives. Some birthdays are remembered because of expensive gifts. Others are remembered because of grand celebrations. But the birthdays that remain in our hearts forever are the ones where someone reminded us we were not alone. Long after the candles burned out and the cake disappeared, the memory of that quiet afternoon continued shining like a light in every life it touched. And perhaps somewhere today, another stranger is standing in another bakery, another grocery store, or another ordinary place, waiting for the chance to become someone else's miracle without ever expecting anything in return.